which leaves us with Bandersnatch then, Scott.
Right, okay. Last up, another return to Netflix. Bandersnatch is a fourth wall smashing, lampshade hanging, death defying, tropifying, choose your own full motion video game slice of interactive fiction that is in the main not really a film, so is of questionable value discussing in this format. So if you want to leave at this point, you're more than welcome to do so. But if you do have Netflix, it's worth spending a couple of hours with Bandersnatch, and I say that as someone who thinks Black Mirror is, in general, the most perplexingly well-received slab of media over the past decade. Mm-hmm. So this feature-length adaptation, or feature-length outing, I guess, is, in terms of overarching narrative, about a young programmer with some mental health issues trying to finish a video game on a tight deadline, adapting a cult classic choose-your-own adventure novel, the creation of which drove its author insane, and I'm sure you can see where this is heading. The gimmick here is that you can, at various points, with various consequences, make choices in the life of Fionn Whitehead's Stefan Butler, and how he interacts with his father, Craig Parkinson, rockstar programmer Colin Rittman, played by Will Poulter, and therapist Dr. Haynes, played by Alice Lowe, amongst other more trivial selections. Now, for an achingly meta interactive fiction like this, it's perhaps fitting that the most fun I've had with this is reading film critics flailing around trying to describe this, when to anyone who's been around video games for the past decade or so, we can simply say, this is a Telltale game, and describe it in its entirety. Or, if, like us greybeards, they've been around since the ZX Spectrum home computing heyday in which Bandersnatch is set, it's the seventh guest, but without the irritating puzzles. And just as that did not turn out to be the future of video games, this is not the future of film, but it's a fun gimmick that's worth some of your time to play with, but nothing like enough to go through the multiple times to find the quote-unquote different endings, especially as many of them seem to be different in the Mass Effect 3 kind of sense. So, most of this review is not going to make a lot of sense unless you're quite au fait with video game culture. I apologise.
I think most of our listeners probably will be.
Yes, we're all a bunch of nerds. Right. Strangely, though, the main thing that stayed with me from Bandersnatch is a similar but much less virulent form of the annoyance of the meta-narrative from Spec Ops: The Line, if you'll permit the tangent. That game, in a nutshell, everything that you did as a protagonist to help the people that you purport to be helping made it much, much worse, to the point that at the end you were presented with your actions by essentially an author avatar saying you could have stopped this by simply not playing the game and not doing all these horrible white phosphor-based things, which is the sort of comment that's sort of clever for about 10 seconds before it falls apart in any analysis, because there's no way to progress that narrative or the game in Spec Ops without performing these actions. And while I see the artistic intent of saying you could stop, the form is tied to the function. Right. Games are expensive. And
I paid 40 quid for this.
So simply not playing is a daft waste of money and a silly thing for a game developer to say, and I did get a similar but slightly less explicit sense of finger-wagging from Bandersnatch, undercut entirely by the way that any option chosen to stop our protagonist's suffering leads to an immediate non-standard game over and a prompt to go back and screw him up a little bit more. So turn that mirror back upon yourself, Charlie Brooker, but kudos for coming up with a film that's difficult to pirate, so I'm sure Netflix were happy about that.
Just going back to your Spec Ops: The Line argument there, Scott, as well. Of course, it always baffled me that from the developers. The logical conclusion of that argument is I could go one better and not buy your game.
Yes,
and we'll see how long you keep making games then. Yeah. How do you like food on your table? Oh my days.
So I guess the only thing I can really say in summation about Netflix, about Bandersnatch, which I enjoyed well enough for the 2 hours that I spent with it, is that it is certainly not worth getting Netflix a subscription for a month by itself just to watch Bandersnatch. However, Roma most definitely is. Mm-hmm. So do that and then fiddle around with Bandersnatch after, and it's not an unpleasant way to spend a couple of hours, particularly if you've got any sort of affinity for video game culture and sort of interactive choose your own adventure sort of thing that this is aping if you grew up with those books, like I'm sure we did. Certainly I did. I went through a few of those. It's a fun little thing to play with. It's a fun little toy, but it's more of a toy than a film. It's an interesting little side project, but yeah, worth a look at, but nothing to beat down Netflix's door to get to.
If Netflix want to go ahead and fund a series of these based on Steve Jackson and even Ian Livingstone's fighting fantasy books, yes. I am right on board with that. Thanks very much. Otherwise, a little bit too gimmicky for me to be paying too much attention, but the discussion that it's provoked has mildly diverting, if nothing else.
It's nice to see Jeff Minter. But that's not something you often get to say about
Jesus,
films.
what, Jeff Minter's in it?
I'm reasonably sure that Jeff Minter is the author that's shown in flashback or in like a sort of archive video at one point. I've not checked that, but I'm pretty sure it is him.
Is he sitting in a cupboard saying, "Don't go into a trance, boys. Don't go into a trance"?
There's a
deep
callback.
cut, yeah. Fair dues. On which note, I suppose we should probably call time on these shenanigans.